Hello, this is Yale School of Management 656. I'm Miles Lasater, and today we'll be talking about prioritization. That is, how do you choose which things to work on? Which features or bug fixes are important? What should the team be working on? Now, this may seem like an easy question, just do the important stuff first, or do the urgent stuff first, or suddenly now we have a question there. And I would have to say that we have generally failed at this as an industry. This study was done over a decade ago, but I think it still is relevant. 64% of features rarely or never used. That means that all of the expense, time, and effort went into building things that perhaps are not that important. And the other thing we've learned is that from a mathematical perspective, scheduling is NP hard. It's really hard. That's if you even know the value of everything and you're trying to schedule them to get them done in the right order and get the most stuff done on time. So this is a hard problem. And your worldview about this problem certainly matters in terms of how you're going to approach solving it. For example, if you believe that the system is essentially a complicated one, but one that can be controlled, you're going to approach it through good planning, through skills and practice and getting the right tools and making sure that you have control of the situation. If you view it as inherently complex, on the other hand, it's going to lead you in a different direction, more about adjusting along the way rather than building a plan up front. The other thing I'll note is that your requirement system and your prioritization process really do go hand in hand. So the way that you're capturing ideas, the way that you're documenting them, the way that you're explaining them, and how that leads into sizing and then choosing which ones to work on, it really all goes together. In this course, we study the Scrum methodology for it, and you'll see there that the user stories with the story points and the regular meetings that you're having with the team to groom the backlog and then to choose what's going into this sprint is all part of that process. And other methodologies, you'd go about it different ways, certainly. It's important to know where you stand when you're doing any prioritization exercise. Important to know what are your customers looking for. So having input from them, informal or formal, really important as you set the stage. Important to remember that you're solving problems and not just building features. So what is the underlying need that's being addressed here? And often that can be an important question. Again, this is somewhat a requirements thing, but ultimately to get the right priority, you have to understand the value that's being created for customers. Really helpful to know how much you're able to do and accomplish so that you can figure out how much to commit to going forward and what your trade-offs are. Understanding where your product stands currently in terms of your technical debt, things that are not obvious in terms of the features that have been built from just looking at or using the product, but under the hood, what is the situation that you're handling as far as technical debt? What are the deadlines you have and the schedule commitments that you've made already? And in our iron triangle, that leaves certainly cost to be considered carefully. If that's an important part of your project, and in the reporting lecture, we go over some of the ways that you can track and measure cost along the way so that you are taking that into account as you're doing your prioritization as well. So in terms of ways to set priority, I think important across all these different methodologies is the fewer cues you have, I would say, the better. One cue per team is probably best. If you're doing prioritization across a larger organization, even having one cue across that large organization actually can be beneficial in many ways, even if you have specialized skill sets, although there is some push and pull here. But you certainly can have far too many cues, which leads to, I think, a complicated prioritization process and a suboptimal outcome in terms of, you're not trading off as many things against each other and therefore not necessarily finding the highest value thing for the global system overall. So a system that people use a decision criteria for prioritization can be fairness, which is one that I would not recommend. That's essentially saying different groups or different types of internal departments or users, parts of the organization deserve to get to pick, maybe in round robin, or, oh, well, they haven't had something in a while, so we should give it to them. Generally doesn't give you the highest value for your external customers. It doesn't generally mean that you're doing things that are in line with the mission or the purpose of the organization. Closely related can be a committee vote. So you get representatives from all of the constituents that matter, and then you essentially vote. I mean, sometimes this can be informal and active, like getting up and putting sticky notes on the board, next to the things that are written up on the whiteboard, or this can be more formal voting systems. Again, it's a way, maybe politically, to reach decisions, and it's better to have a decision than not in many cases, but doesn't often lead to the highest value things being done necessarily. So particularly in a startup domain, sometimes people want to cut through all this and really simplify and have a very straightforward heuristic for making decisions. And it may be revenue. It may be growing the number of customers, users, or dollars coming in. Certainly, there are some trade-offs between revenue now and later, and it can get complicated if your revenue items are more speculative, which is common in a startup situation. And so getting comfortable with the speculative nature of these items that you're prioritizing is important and can be a struggle for some teams. Some still want to keep things simple, but want to move beyond the revenue side of things, particularly that future trade-off in terms of protecting revenue from current customers versus future. And what about the expense side of things? So this is a common framework that people will work with. Challenge is it doesn't necessarily help you with trading off one against the other. So sometimes people introduce scoring systems. They can use those criteria or others and give a score to each dimension, give it a weighting, and the scores will mechanically tell you which things are the highest priority. The challenge with this is sometimes it can begin to feel arbitrary, or even if not, not all users will understand it. It can become complicated depending on the number of criteria that you're having, and not necessarily intuitive to everyone why things are coming to the top. So again, in that interest of simplifying, some people will use the Moscow system and know that's not doing just whatever the Kremlin wants, but that's a system of sorting things into must, should, could, and won't in terms of it's an agreement that you're talking with your development team and those that represent users saying, or customers saying that this must happen, it's a have to have, this is a nice to have, this is something that we're definitely not going to do. And I do think the won't, or the things that are explicitly chosen to be out of scope and not addressed, can be a really powerful idea. So that's one that I think can be borrowed for other systems as well. All of that, again, can feel arbitrary and sometimes take some time to do those kinds of negotiations. And sometimes those with decision-making power in the organization will want to cut through that, will want to get some more speed, or will have a particular viewpoint on how things should go, and will dictate or decide what it is that should be built. This is a system that I participated in, but doesn't always lead to the best decisions. And one step closer to the product is, have the product owner have a fiat of this is what's going to happen. I think this can be often advocated by those that are in favor of Agile. The Scrum process can be interpreted as essentially saying this, although I do think it's important and helpful and leads to better outcomes if you support the product owner with a framework that's well understood in the organization about how things are going to get prioritized, rather than just it all happening between their ears. My personal favorite that I have not used in reality but learned a lot about and heard others have had some good success with it is the cost of delay divided by duration, closely related to concept of weighted shortest job first. They're similar but not identical. So cost of delay divided by duration. So your cost of delay here is really more in the economic sense of opportunity cost. You don't want to confuse this with pure expense or cost, because often this is a concept of missed revenue. So that can often be some of the most valuable things that you're working on, and understanding that you're foregoing that revenue, and that is essentially a cost or an opportunity cost of delaying delivering that project, that feature, which will generate the revenue. That's what the cost of delay is from, and it's best done in money, in dollars. And so This is not a common way of estimating in Agile with Scrum. You can either convert it on the back end, sometimes do it not with the team, or it can be done with the team. In terms of duration, this is measured in the same time units that you're using as you consider the cost of delay. The duration, again, is not typically measured in Agile environment, but you can convert using story points and your velocity to get a sense of what your duration will be for a particular feature that's been estimated. There are different curves of the cost of delay. So as you delay something, does it essentially ramp up pretty quickly and give you the same benefits over time? In which case this is essentially equivalent to a rectangle of the time frames that you're late times the dollars there, which is pretty simple to calculate. There are sometimes, although it's not as common as you'd expect, there is a reduced peak situation where this might be perhaps a product or feature that is only going to have a very limited lifetime that you're aware of and you can specify. So this may have to do with a deadline that's external, a sporting event that's going to happen, and something you're delivering related to that. And the sooner you get it out, the more of the market share you can capture, but it's all going to go away as you reach some date, perhaps. Or you could have a situation like this one where you are going to capture a second position in the marketplace, you believe, based on the market dynamics. And it doesn't always happen this way because sometimes a second entrant can capture more market share. So you'd want to really understand why you're using this kind of curve, but it will give you a reduced peak. And again, you could roughly correlate this to two different rectangles. So to pull it all back again, this is a bunch of different priority decision criteria that are used in industry. There are a number of other ones that are studied in operational research, and there's tons of decision rules you could use. People use genetic algorithms. They use large-scale computer simulations to test which ones are best, and it can depend on your environment particularly. Most of the studies I've seen are focused on schedule performance and not necessarily even on creating the most value, identifying it, and understanding where that value is and making sure that gets delivered, which is a whole other layer to this challenge. So this is still very much an active area of research. I will note that when you're going through whichever prioritization process that you choose, who is in the room is very important. So in Agile Scrum, you want to have your team there. In other processes, you could choose to do this. The folks that are going to be doing the work present in the room, committing and having a conversation about the work that's getting chosen. As the organization scales, it's harder to have everyone in the room. The ways that you can gather input and make this virtually true certainly can help. And it will lead to different decision criteria and outcomes depending on the knowledge that's available to the folks in the room. I will close here by mentioning that you're certainly looking for the most valuable things to be doing, and your prioritization process should make sure that you're identifying those black swans that really can deliver the outsized value. And you don't want those things to get stuck in the fuzzy front end. So you don't want to have a process that takes months and months to get approval or review. I mean, it can work, but you may be missing out on opportunities as they get stuck there for sizing and prioritization and approval. So think about that early part of the process and see if you can move things through pretty quickly so that you don't miss out on all of that value. So this has been the prioritization lecture for Management 656, and I hope you've enjoyed it. We look forward to working with you through the rest of the course. Thank you.